Hello, welcome back. So Vanguard recently came up with a 2025 How America Saves report. The average 401k across 5 million participants that were surveyed hit an all-time high of $148,153. But when you break it down by age, the story gets interesting. For example, if you're between 35 to 44 years old, the median person has $28,318 in their 401k. But the average is $92,838. That's more than 3 times higher. If you're wondering why there's such a huge gap and what this means for your retirement planning, stick around because I'm about to break it all down. If you're new here, my name is Alice. I'm a CPA. I quit my 6-figure finance job back in 2023 and I ditched a pretty fancy career path and what everyone thought was a dream life of becoming a CFO to run my own personal brand and online business. In today's video, I want to show you not just what these numbers mean when it comes to your 401k, but also how things like your age, your income, and even your industry impact what you have saved in your 401k. So here's what Vanguard's 2025 data shows for 401k balances by age. People who are under 25 years old have a median balance of $1,948 and an average balance of $6,899. From ages 25 to 34, the median balance is $16,255, and the average balance is $42,640. For ages 35 to 44, the median balance is $39,958. The average balance is $103,552. From ages 45 to 54, the median balance is $67,796. The average balance is $188,643. From 55 to 64, the median balance is $95,642. Average balance is $271,320. And from 65 and above, the median balance is $95,425. And the average balance is $299,442. Now, what do these numbers mean? You see how different each median and average number is? Going back to the ages 35 to 44 example, the median is $39,958, but the average is $103,552. The reason why there's such a big difference is because a small number of people with very high balances actually pull up the average. Right? So when someone says, oh, the average 40-year-old has $103,552 balance in their 401k, that's technically true, but that's not what most 40-year-olds actually have. In fact, the data actually is kind of interesting and almost skewed in that sense because 41% of participants at Vanguard have an account balance with more than $250,000. So just to take note that this isn't data across America per se, just with Vanguard, but because there were 5 million participants, it's still a pretty sizable number to draw conclusions from, in my opinion. So how do we interpret median? It's what the person in the middle has. Half of people have more than the median and half have less. So it's a much more realistic benchmark for where you should be when you're comparing yourself. So when you're comparing yourself, and let's say you're 40 with $40,000 in your 401k, you're not failing, you're actually slightly above the median for your age group. So understanding this can change how you feel about yourself and your own retirement progress. Now you may be wondering, there are these numbers, but what about income? Because of course, your actual income impacts how much you can save and invest. And so income really does change everything. Your income level doesn't just affect how much you can save, it affects how much you should save. And so this is what Vanguard's data actually reveals. We're going to call it the income effect. Typically higher earners, they contribute more in absolute dollars. They also get larger employer matches, but they also at the same time need more money in retirement to maintain their current lifestyle. So if you are 45 years old and you're watching this today and you make $60,000 a year, the median 401k, so that's the middle number for a 45-year-old is $67,796. So that's about 1.12 times your annual salary, which isn't bad. If you're 45 years old and you make $120,000, that same $67,776 is only about half of your annual salary. So you would actually need about $120,000 to $240,000 to be on track if you want to maintain your current lifestyle in retirement. How we can interpret these numbers another way is using this income adjusted 401k formula. So if you think about it this way, by age 30, you want to target about 1 times your annual salary in your 401k. By age 40, you want to target 3 times your annual salary. By age 50, target 6 times your annual salary. And by 60, target 8 times your annual salary. So if you make $80,000 at age 40, you should aim for $240,000. That's 3 times your annual salary in your 401k, not just the median. The median is really low. The median is $39,000. But here's the key. If you make $40,000 at age 40, then $120,000 in your 401k puts you in great shape, even though it's below the average numbers that you see in headlines. So this is why sometimes comparing yourself to generic averages can be misleading, because your target for yourself is based on your income. It's your retirement goals and the lifestyle that you want to maintain in retirement. It's not just about comparing yourself with somebody at a different age, because salary matters a lot as well, and salary impacts lifestyle. Now, Vanguard comes out with this report every single year, and between this year and the previous year, here are some of the changes that happened. So Vanguard saw an average 401k balance increase by 10%. So this has gone up from 134,128 to 148,153. Median balances have increased by 8%, going from 35,286 to 38,176. And 45% of participants actually increased their contribution rates, which is actually a record high. Couple things to note about these changes. The first one is that between 2023 and 2024, the S&P 500 had really good years, generating more than 25% annual returns. That is generally the biggest contributor, but also things that Vanguard has noted, like better plan design, higher default contributions, and higher participant engagement. Now, what's really interesting is that Vanguard also breaks down this data by income and also by gender. And in terms of the income impact, one thing they note is that higher earners aren't just saving more in dollars, they also save more in actual percentages. And higher earners tend to get bigger employer matches, which are often percentage-based. They tend to have better access to investment advice, and they can afford to take more investment risk when they are young. The report in Vanguard also shows that men tend to have higher 401k balances than women at every income level. This could be for multiple reasons. For women, whether it's career interruptions for caregiving, women tend to have more conservative investment approaches. They may contribute lower in contributions at similar income levels, and they have less access to employer matches due to needing part-time work. If you want to optimize your 401k and you're a high earner, here are some tips. Max out your 401k every year. So in 2025, that's $23,500. That's the maximum contribution limit. And you do get a $7,500 catch up if you're over 50. If you're high income, you can also consider mega backdoor Roth strategies, which basically allows high income earners to contribute more to their Roth retirement accounts than typically allowed through a traditional Roth IRA. We also want to make sure we're not letting lifestyle creep and lifestyle inflation impact our savings potential. Now, Vanguard also breaks their data down by industry. So like where you work, whether you work in tech, finance, etc. Now, according to their report, high saving industries include those that are in tech. People in tech tend to have average salaries of 100K to 200K. They tend to have very generous employer matches, stock option benefits. Okay, so this is like the people that work at Google and Apple. Finance has high compensation. They tend to have sophisticated benefits. Healthcare specialists have a lot of high earning potential, but they also tend to start their careers later due to education requirements. So those are the 3 high saving industries. Moderate saving industries include general healthcare, which can have good salaries, but also student loans, government jobs, lower salaries, but very good benefits and pensions, public education, which has lower salaries, but good retirement benefits. And then we have the challenging savings industry, which is things like retail, hospitality, manufacturing. If you work in these industries, saving money is harder, typically because lower wages, limited benefits, maybe even variable income. So now that we talked about average balance in your 401k, let's also talk about asset allocation. What are people actually investing their money in? So with Vanguard, you probably know this, you can set up a self-direct account and you can go buy stocks yourself. They also have their own product line of ETFs and mutual funds. You might also be able to contribute to your company plan and get a match, or you can have your investments managed professionally by one of their advisors. So when it comes to asset allocation, according to Vanguard equities, so stocks like Coca-Cola and Apple, it's still considered the dominant asset class. Right? And Vanguard says that an asset allocation of 80% plus of your portfolio is considered appropriate. So if you had a $100,000 portfolio and 80% of that is in stocks, that's considered appropriate. Age actually impacts equity allocation as well. So this is where it gets really interesting. 20 years ago, back in 2005, younger people, they actually used to be more conservative and they would have less stocks in hand. But 20 years later, it's actually a downward slope. So that actually means that younger people now in 2025, their portfolios have had the highest amount of stock in history. Okay, so people that are like between the ages of 20 to 30 tend to have a portfolio of over 85% in stocks. Whereas people that are closer to retirement age, this number drops down to 40 to 50%. So people closer to retirement age might be holding mutual funds, they may be holding more cash, T-bills, other investments that aren't equities or stock. People who build their own portfolios, so like just buy their own stocks and do their own investing, they tend to hold more extreme equity exposure as well compared to people who have professionally managed accounts. Usually professionally managed accounts tend to be more conservative and more for wealth preservation rather than aggressive growth. So to recap everything we talked about today, we talked about how much you should have in your 401k by age based on Vanguard's report. And it shows that 401k balances today have hit record highs. But when you compare yourself to these numbers, you should be looking at the median numbers, which are more realistic than looking at averages. Income level makes a big difference as well. Of course, it impacts your saving targets, and income level is impacted by the industry that you work in. Some industries allow people to save more than others. Industry also impacts how much you can save and invest as well, because it impacts your earning potential and your saving strategy. And then we also talked about asset allocation and how people that are younger tend to hold more of their portfolio in stocks as opposed to people that are closer to retirement age. Whether you are ahead of the median, behind the average, or somewhere in between, what matters most is that you are consistently saving and investing your money and taking advantage of any employer matches if you're offered them. If you guys like this video today, you're gonna love my other video on the differences between index funds, mutual funds, and ETFs. And in that video, I actually go deep into a couple of Vanguard examples and break down the differences between these three and what you should consider if you are a self-investor and you're wanting to understand the differences between these three things. So I break that down in detail. Make sure you check out that video up top. Let me know down in the comments below what questions you might have about how much you should save in your 401k, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until next time.